Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're taking a look at how Islam approaches raising and disciplining children. We've got some really fascinating excerpts from Islamic texts to help us understand this.
Yeah, it's something that I think a lot of people are curious about. Uh, what are the guidelines?
Yeah.
What are the principles? What's the overall approach?
Exactly. And I think, even for people who are familiar with Islam, there can be some misconceptions about this topic. So we're going to really try to delve into those original sources and kind of unpack what they have to say.
Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize that we're not just talking about the what, but also the why.
Yeah.
Like, what are the underlying reasons behind these teachings?
Absolutely. So, from what I've been reading, it seems like the texts really emphasize the significant responsibility that parents have in Islam when it comes to raising their children.
Yeah, it's not just about providing for their physical needs, food, clothing, shelter. It goes way beyond that. It's about shaping their character, their spiritual growth.
Their moral development.
Yeah, exactly. It's about guiding them towards righteousness and protecting them from straying from the path of Islam.
And this responsibility, it's highlighted right from the start, actually. There's a powerful verse from the Quran, Al-Tarim 66.6, that talks about safeguarding families from hellfire.
Yeah, that verse is really powerful. It really drives home the gravity of the task. And, Imam al-Tabari, in his commentary, he explains that this protection is not just about physical safety.
Right.
Keeping them safe from harm in this world.
It's got that eternal dimension to it.
It does, yeah. It's about instilling in them obedience to Allah, nurturing their faith, so that they're protected from the consequences of straying from his path.
So it's like you're not just shaping their behavior in this life, but you're actually playing a role in their destiny in the afterlife.
Exactly.
And that's a lot to think about.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is. And this idea of guiding others towards Islam, it's not limited to parents, right? I mean, we talk about every Muslim being a daya, someone who calls others to Islam.
Yeah, exactly. But parents, they have this special responsibility.
Because they're the first and most influential teachers in their children's lives.
That's right. It's like, just as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was commanded to call his tribe to Islam, parents have that same obligation towards their children.
It's about creating that Islamic environment at home from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And the texts use a really interesting analogy to kind of explain this responsibility. They compare parents to shepherds.
Yes. That's a great point. There's a hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, compares various roles in society to shepherds, highlighting their responsibility for their flock.
It's such a beautiful metaphor, I think.
Yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor.
Because it really illustrates that level of care, guidance, and protection that's expected of parents in Islam.
Yeah, so you can imagine, right? A shepherd who guides their sheep to pasture, protects them from danger.
Keeps them safe.
Keeps them safe, make sure they're well fed.
Mm-hmm.
Parents are expected to do the same for their children, but on a spiritual and moral level.
Guide them towards righteousness, protect them from harmful influences.
Exactly. And this concept of responsibility towards your children, it's a recurring theme throughout Islamic teachings. It really shows how crucial parenting is in shaping future generations.
Yeah, it really does. So, okay, we've kind of established the why, right? This immense responsibility to raise children in accordance with Islam. But what about the how? What does this actually look like in practice?
Right. So moving from theory to practice.
Exactly. And from what I've been gathering, the texts emphasize starting early.
Yeah.
It's about nurturing a love for Allah and his messenger from a young age, introducing them to the beauty and wisdom of Islamic teachings.
Yeah, it's about instilling that love and that foundation from the very beginning.
And it seems like stories would be a really powerful way to do that. The text mentions this really compelling story about a king's daughter and a worshiper reciting the verse about hellfire.
Oh, yeah, that's a very powerful story.
Mm.
It really highlights the impact that even a simple recitation can have on a young heart.
Right. So this young girl, she's surrounded by worldly comforts. She has everything she could possibly want.
Yeah.
But she's so deeply moved by this concept of the afterlife and the potential for punishment that she completely changes her behavior.
Right. She tears her clothes. She refuses to eat or sleep until she understands what she needs to do to avoid hellfire.
Yeah, it's a pretty dramatic reaction.
It is.
What do you think it tells us about how children process these concepts?
I think it shows that children, even at a young age, they can grasp the gravity of these teachings. It's not about scaring them,
Right.
but it's about fostering a healthy awareness of Allah's power and justice
Right.
and the importance of choosing the right path.
So it's about balancing that understanding of consequences with the mercy and love of Allah as well.
Exactly, yeah. It's not just blind obedience out of fear.
Right.
It's about nurturing a genuine love and respect for Allah.
Understanding why following his path is ultimately the best choice for us.
Yeah.
And part of that responsibility also involves protecting children from influences that might lead them astray, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The text specifically mentions keeping children away from places of immorality and misguidance, and even uses the example of, inappropriate television content.
Which I guess speaks to the broader principle of creating a healthy and wholesome environment for your children.
Exactly, yeah. It's about being mindful of the things that they're exposed to, the things that they see, the things that they hear.
The people they interact with.
Yeah, you're responsible for creating an environment that supports their spiritual growth and protects them from things that might negatively impact their understanding of Islam.
So it's like actively creating the conditions for them to thrive, rather than just reacting to problems as they come up.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of proactive steps, the texts also highlight the importance of teaching children about prayer.
Right. And there's that well-known hadith, right? The one with the specific instructions about when to start teaching children to pray.
Yeah, the one narrated by Abu Huraira. It instructs parents to start teaching prayer at age 7, and if they haven't started praying regularly by age 10, to discipline them. And it also mentions separating children in their beds at that age.
So it's like a roadmap, right? It
Yeah.
outlines this gradual approach to Islamic education. You start with gentle encouragement, and then as the child grows, you introduce more structure, and if needed, discipline.
That's a good way to understand it. And what's interesting about this hadith is that it emphasizes age appropriateness.
Right.
It recognizes that children develop at different paces.
Yeah.
And our approach to teaching and discipline should reflect that.
Which leads us to, I think, the big question: what does discipline actually look like in Islam?
Right. Getting to the heart of the matter.
And the texts, are they very clear about it?
Yeah, they are. They're very clear that it should never be about harshness or cruelty.
Yeah.
They stress being merciful, forbearing, and approachable, using persuasion and dialogue as your primary tools.
So it's about guiding them with a gentle hand, not ruling with an iron fist.
Exactly. However, the texts do mention the possibility of physical discipline as a last resort, but it's really important to understand the context and the limitations of that.
Okay, this is where I think it gets really interesting, because I know a lot of people have strong opinions about this topic.
Yeah, and it's crucial to understand that smacking or any form of physical discipline, it's never the first option in Islam.
So when is it considered permissible?
It's only considered in very specific situations of willful disobedience, and only when other methods of discipline have failed to correct the behavior.
And even then, there are strict guidelines, right?
Absolutely. It should never be done out of anger, and it should never cause actual injury. It's meant as a last resort to deter a child from seriously harmful behavior, not as a regular punishment.
This makes me think about the concept of had punishments in Islamic law. Those are pretty serious penalties for major offenses, right?
Yeah, things like theft, adultery, slander.
Yeah.
And the purpose of those punishments, while severe, is ultimately deterrence. They're meant to protect society.
Right.
And discourage people from engaging in behavior that harms themselves or others.
So connecting it back to child discipline, even when physical discipline is considered permissible, it's still within this framework of boundaries and consequences.
That's a great observation. It's about establishing clear expectations.
Right.
And consequences for actions, even at a young age. And there's another hadith that can help us understand this idea of boundaries and consequences. It's one about hanging the whip.
That sounds a bit intense. What's the story there?
So it's narrated by Ibn Abbas. And in it, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, advises parents to display a whip where the members of the household can see it.
So I'm guessing this isn't about encouraging parents to constantly threaten their children with physical punishment.
You're right. Scholars interpret this hadith as emphasizing the importance of setting clear boundaries.
Right.
And having visible reminders of the consequences for misbehavior.
So it's like a visual cue, right?
Yeah.
That reinforces the idea that actions have consequences. It's not about promoting violence.
Right.
It's about creating a structured environment with clear expectations.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is that discipline is an integral part of raising children who are strong in their faith and character.
Right.
But it should always be approached with wisdom and compassion. It's about guiding them towards a path of goodness, not punishing them into submission.
And this is where creating a positive and Islamically grounded environment for your children really comes in, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The texts we're looking at, they're very clear about the importance of surrounding children with good examples,
Right.
both in terms of people and resources. It specifically mentions ensuring that educators, including parents themselves, are religiously committed and knowledgeable.
So it's about practicing what you preach. You can't expect your children to embrace Islamic values if you're not embodying those values yourself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of simple things. The text suggests using audio recordings of Quran recitations, Islamic lectures, stories of the prophets to create a positive and educational atmosphere.
It's about immersing them in the beauty and wisdom of Islam from a young age.
Yeah.
So it becomes a natural part of their life.
Exactly. It's about nurturing a genuine love and appreciation for their faith, not just imposing a set of rules.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm already starting to see how these principles can be applied in practical ways.
I'm glad to hear that. We've only just scratched the surface, though. There's still so much more to explore in terms of the nuances of balancing discipline with nurturing a child's individuality.
Right.
And fostering a love for learning within an Islamic framework.
Well, that sounds like the perfect segue to our next segment.
It does.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back. So we were talking about balancing that discipline, right, with nurturing a child's individuality and fostering that love for learning within the Islamic framework. It's a delicate balance, but it's so important to, raise well-rounded individuals.
It feels like we're moving from the what of Islamic discipline to the how now. What are some strategies and approaches that parents can actually use?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that each child is unique. They come with their own personalities, their own talents, their own ways of learning.
So how do we balance upholding those Islamic principles of discipline with also recognizing and nurturing each child's individuality?
I think it starts with observation. Really, really paying attention to your child, understanding their strengths, their weaknesses. What are they interested in? What are they passionate about? And then you can use that knowledge to guide them effectively.
So instead of this one-size-fits-all approach, it's about adapting your parenting style to fit each child's unique needs.
Exactly, yeah. Some children might respond well to verbal reminders, while others might need more concrete consequences or rewards. Some might thrive on structure and clear rules, while others might need more freedom and flexibility.
It sounds like there's actually a lot of room for flexibility within the Islamic framework of parenting.
There is, absolutely. Islam, it provides those guiding principles, that moral compass, but it doesn't dictate a rigid set of parenting techniques. Parents are encouraged to use their best judgment and adapt their approach to fit their child's individual needs.
This makes me think about the concept of fitra, the idea that every child is born with this natural inclination towards goodness and faith. How does that play into this idea of individualizing your approach to parenting?
Oh, it's a crucial concept. Recognizing and nurturing your child's fitra. It means creating a loving and supportive environment, where they feel safe to explore their individuality, to develop their talents. You're not trying to mold them into a specific image. You're helping them to blossom into the best versions of themselves, in line with Islamic values.
So it's not about suppressing their natural inclinations, but about channeling those inclinations in a positive and productive way.
Exactly, yeah. It's about guiding them towards the path of righteousness while allowing their unique personalities to shine through.
And this ties in nicely with fostering a love for learning, which is something we touched on earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeking knowledge is a lifelong endeavor in Islam, and it starts from a young age.
So it's not just about teaching them Islamic knowledge. It's about instilling in them the love of learning in general.
Exactly, yeah. Encouraging curiosity, critical thinking, a love for exploration. These are all part of nurturing a child's intellectual growth within an Islamic framework.
And that goes back to creating that positive and stimulating environment we talked about before, surrounding them with books, educational resources, and of course, being good role models ourselves.
Precisely. You want to create a home where learning is valued, it's celebrated, where children feel comfortable asking questions, challenging assumptions, exploring the world around them.
But what about when children inevitably make mistakes? How do we balance holding them accountable with also encouraging them to keep learning and growing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where this beautiful concept of tarbiyah comes in. It's a holistic approach to child rearing that encompasses both discipline and nurturing, guidance and support.
So it's not just about punishing wrongdoing, it's about understanding why a child behaved a certain way and addressing that root cause.
Exactly. It's about helping children learn from their mistakes, make amends if necessary, and grow into responsible and compassionate individuals.
And that requires a lot of patience, understanding, and open communication.
Absolutely, yeah. Tarbiyah is a journey. It's not a destination. It's an ongoing process of guiding, supporting, and nurturing your children as they face the challenges of growing up.
It sounds like it's about being present and involved in their lives and being this like constant source of love and guidance.
You got it. And it's a role that requires constant self-reflection and improvement. As parents, we're learning and growing right alongside our children.
This has been so eye-opening. It's like reframing that whole concept of discipline within this broader framework of love, guidance, individual growth.
I'm glad you're finding this helpful. And remember, this journey of tarbiyah, it benefits not only your children, but also you as a parent.
Right.
It's an opportunity for your own spiritual growth.
It reminds me of the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "The best of you are those who are best to their families."
What a beautiful reminder. Yeah. It shows us the deep connection between our personal growth and our efforts in raising righteous and compassionate children.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from those like fundamental principles to the more nuanced approaches. But I bet our listeners are eager to hear about some specific, like practical techniques they can use.
Yeah, you're right. Let's move on to those in our next segment. We'll explore some tangible tips and real life examples of how to apply these Islamic principles in everyday parenting.
So we've been talking about the Islamic approach to raising and disciplining children, and I'm really excited to get into some of those like practical tips in this segment. Like how do we actually, put all this into practice?
Yeah, let's talk about the how-to, right? How do we actually take these principles and apply them in our daily lives as parents?
We've talked about, discipline within a framework of love and guidance, recognizing a child's individuality, fostering a love for learning. Where do we even begin?
Well, one of the most fundamental things is setting a good example. Children are incredibly observant.
Yeah.
And they learn so much by watching us. Our actions, they really do speak volumes.
So we have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. If we want our children to pray regularly, we need to make prayer a priority in our own lives. If we want them to speak kindly and treat others with respect, well, that has to be reflected in how we interact with everyone, including our spouses and our children.
So it's about creating that Islamic environment at home, not just through our words, but through how we live our lives.
That's a great way to put it. And it's important to remember that none of us are perfect,
Yeah.
We will make mistakes. But it's about striving to be the best versions of ourselves, recognizing our shortcomings, and seeking forgiveness and guidance when we fall short.
And that in itself can be a valuable lesson for children.
Absolutely.
Seeing us acknowledge our mistakes and strive to do better.
Yeah, it shows them that making mistakes is part of being human, that we're all on this journey of learning and growing. It teaches them humility and the importance of seeking forgiveness.
So leading by example, that's a really powerful foundation. But what about when we're dealing with those challenging behaviors? Are there any specific strategies that are effective within an Islamic framework?
Well, one technique that's often very effective is positive reinforcement. It's about catching your child doing something good and praising their efforts. Even the small things, this can go a long way in encouraging positive behavior.
It's like that saying, you catch more bees with honey than with vinegar. Focusing on the good can be more effective than just pointing out the bad all the time.
Exactly. Acknowledging their good deeds, expressing appreciation for their efforts, it can really motivate them to keep up those positive behaviors.
And it helps build their self-esteem and their confidence, too.
Absolutely. When children feel good about themselves and what they're capable of, they're more likely to make positive choices.
But what about when they do misbehave? How do we address those situations in a way that's both firm and loving?
I think communication is so important. Rather than getting angry or immediately jumping to punishment, try to understand why your child is acting that way. Talk to them calmly, respectfully, listen to their perspective, and help them understand why their behavior was unacceptable.
So it's about turning those moments into learning opportunities, not just reacting out of frustration.
Exactly. It's about helping them develop self-awareness, critical thinking skills, a sense of responsibility for their actions.
And that might involve setting like clear boundaries and consequences.
Absolutely, yeah. Children need to understand that their actions have consequences, both positive and negative. And those consequences should be appropriate to the situation and to your child's age and understanding.
It's not about being punitive, it's about helping them make better choices in the future.
Right. And sometimes the most effective consequences are natural ones. If your child refuses to eat their dinner, they might have to go to bed hungry. If they break a toy, they might have to do without it.
It's like letting them experience the real world impact of their choices in a safe environment.
Exactly. Yeah. It can be a powerful way for them to learn about responsibility and decision making.
This has been so insightful. I feel like we've really moved beyond just the mechanics of discipline and into the heart of what it means to be a parent.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? Nurturing our children's hearts and minds, guiding them towards righteousness, equipping them to navigate the challenges of life with wisdom and compassion.
And it's a journey that we undertake with love, patience, and a recognition that we ourselves are always learning and growing alongside our children.
So well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave you with a question to ponder. How can we as parents create an environment that fosters not just obedience, but a genuine love for Allah, a thirst for knowledge, and a commitment to living a righteous life?
That's such a powerful question. And it reminds us that, Islamic discipline, it isn't just a set of rules. It's a path to cultivating hearts connected to Allah and minds that are eager to learn and grow.
Exactly. And it's a journey that we embark on with constant effort, reflection, and a willingness to seek guidance and support along the way.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. It's been a truly enriching conversation.
The pleasure was all mine.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. May Allah grant us all the wisdom and strength to raise children who are a source of pride and joy in this life and the next.